Hello and welcome to this edition of Northwest Newsweek. I'm Brittany Ramsey. The Northwestern Health Unit's medical officer says variants of concern are on the rise in that area. The first case of the Brazil variant was discovered this week in a now resolved case in Dryden. This comes as the health unit reported 11 new cases Friday. 10 of them are in the Sioux Lookout area. The other case is from Fort Francis. As of Friday, Sioux Lookout had 28 active cases, while the NWHU as a whole had 67 active. 3 people are hospitalized with the virus in that part of the region. Since January, the NWHU has reported 56 variant cases. All of them were the UK variant until this week. The Brazil variant was discovered. VOCs were confirmed in Kenora, Fort Francis, and Atikokan. However, Dr. Kit Young-Hoon says there could be more in other communities as testing for variants isn't always possible.
Some samples, however, don't have enough virus in them to be able to do that additional testing, that additional screening test to determine if it's a variant. So roughly about 10%, depending on the type of samples, it can be a bit more than that. We get a no result. We don't know what the results of the screening test is, and that's because the amount of virus in the sample was not large enough.
Now, per Ministry of Health guidelines, all cases in the NWHU region are being treated as variants of concern out of precaution. Meanwhile, you can add Thunder Bay's medical officer to the list of experts concerned about mixed messaging regarding the AstraZeneca vaccine. Dr. Janet DeMille says the recent suggestion from NACI that people in low-risk areas wait for Pfizer or Moderna isn't helping the vaccine rollout. DeMille continues to urge everyone in the district to get whatever shot they can as soon as they're eligible. Ryan Benazzo reports.
The way it came out the other day may be not helpful.
The recent messaging from the National Advisory Committee on Immunizations may have added to vaccine hesitancy across the country, but Dr. Janet DeMille has a clear message for those here in the Thunder Bay District.
I'm encouraging people to get the first vaccine that's available to them. The risks associated with COVID, whether it's to an individual or their family, are much higher than the risk caused by any vaccine.
DeMille says vaccine hesitancy hasn't greatly impacted the rollout here as of yet. All of the vaccines coming into our region are being distributed in a timely manner, but the health unit is fielding a lot of questions.
These questions are often very legitimate, and I think as we move forward with the broader rollout, we will be continuing to put out messaging and encouraging people to go to credible sources of information about vaccines, to follow us on social media.
Vaccinations were down across the district last week, but that's largely due to the number of doses that have been diverted to hotspots. DeMille maintains our shipments should increase by the middle of the month. As for a regional reopening plan, DeMille says she's had discussions with the province, but there's no indication as to when that might happen. The color-coded guidelines may even have to be revised first due to the increased prevalence of variants of concern. DeMille notes, by the way, that many of our recent cases here are a result of those VOCs. Ryan Benazzo, TBT News.
The Lac Seul First Nation, which falls under the Sioux Lookout Health Hub, is under a code red lockdown as it fights a growing COVID-19 outbreak. The First Nation, about 40 kilometers west of Sioux Lookout, had 11 active cases as of Friday. Its on-reserve population is about 860. Now, under the code red lockdown, members are directed only to leave their homes for essential reasons, such as picking up groceries or medication, attending medical appointments, or getting exercise outdoors. Federal Health Minister Patty Hajdu says it's still too early for her ministry to announce clear guidelines on what activities vaccinated people can engage in, but it is coming soon. The local MP also has some words of advice for those hesitant on booking their vaccination. Corey Nordstrom has more.
As needles continue to get into arms on the daily, many people are now wondering if they can get together with their fellow vaccinated individuals or perhaps take part in some social activities. Health Minister Patty Hajdu has said her government will be unveiling guidance very shortly for those who have received at least their first shot, but don't expect it to take precedence over other measures in place.
We're very close to releasing national guidelines, but of course they will be generic in their nature given that each province, territory, and indeed region will have guidelines based on epidemiology.
The Thunder Bay Superior North MP understands the impatience that many in her riding feel with vastly lower COVID rates than the rest of the province, but the same stay-at-home order in place.
And I spoke to a woman in Manitouwadge a week ago, so ago who has a small clothing store, and she's been closed down for so long, and yet they have no cases. And, it's a small store to begin with, so there's not a situation of overcrowding. And there's an incredible frustration by businesses in particular.
Heidi wants those who have grown frustrated to remember that just because things are okay now doesn't mean things can't change in a hurry, and to continue following all public health guidelines.
We're still not at a place where we're seeing zero case growth. I will remind everybody, we are still seeing some cases every day. And each of those cases, if they're not properly managed, has the potential to spur on the growth of many others.
Corey Nordstrom, TBT News.
Meanwhile, lumber mill employees in Ear Falls are being given some unique financial incentives to get vaccinated against COVID-19. Ecom Timber is offering $350 to all staff and outside contractors to get immunized. People will receive $200 by providing proof of their first dose and another $150 after their second dose. The Ear Falls Lumber Mill has over 100 employees, along with dozens of subcontractors working in harvesting operations. And company officials say it's the final step in their efforts to keep their mills across Canada safe.
The response has been really overwhelmingly positive. People have been thrilled that we're offering this because it's highly confidential. It's not a coercive measure. You're not forced to get the vaccine, but you are rewarded for doing so, and that I think is striking a chord with many people. It's a way to say thank you to them for going ahead and just getting it done and getting us back to normal as soon as possible.
Forestry operations have been deemed essential since the start of the pandemic, and Nashva says it's critical to keep all their mills running now more than ever due to the high demand for lumber this year.
So we've seen there's been, I would say, maybe a historic backlog of home building in North America that's we're just catching up to right now. So there's a very high demand for new construction materials, but there's also the fact that everyone has been staying home and kind of doing renovation projects or building a deck, or all of those things have kind of contributed to this very high demand that we've been seeing over the last few months. Absolutely.
Officials with Unifor, which represents workers at the Resolute mills around the region, say they hope the company takes notice of what Ecom is doing and follows suit in offering incentives for vaccinations. Kiiwetinoong MPP Sol Mamakwa expressed disappointment this week in the Ontario government's report on long-term care. He says the province has yet to create some much-needed long-term care beds in his riding. Mamakwa aired his grievance at Queen's Park, where he called out the Minister of Long-Term Care. The NDP Indigenous Affairs critic says the Menoyawin Health Centre in Sioux Lookout is still awaiting beds that were promised 3 years ago. His frustration comes as the government looks to add tens of thousands of beds as a result of the pandemic without first honoring previous commitments.
We desperately need more long-term care beds across the region in far northern Ontario. Why hasn't the government not taken any action to get 76 long-term care beds they promised to Sioux Lookout Menoyawin Health Centre in 2018?
During our last round of projects, 80 projects, in that included projects for the Indigenous communities, because we believe that this is a very important area, as well as the Francophone communities and other groups that we recognize the importance of being able to serve people in their own language.
Mamakwa adds that many elders in northern and remote communities are sent away from home to receive care and only return for their funerals. 7 families have been displaced in Sioux Lookout following an apartment building fire Wednesday night. Sioux Lookout OPP, Fire Department, and Northwest EMS responded to the blaze around 6 p.m. inside a 7-unit building on Prince Street. All tenants made it out of the building safely. The fire was quickly put out before it could spread to other properties. The OPP is working with the Office of the Fire Marshal to investigate the cause. Residents in Fort Francis are one step closer to knowing what the new names will be for Colonization Road East and West. The renaming has been a contentious issue in the community. On Monday, members of the town's planning committee finalized their shortlist to present to council later this month. For Colonization Road West, the four options are Sunset, Heritage, Spirit, and Moonlight Trail or Road. For Colonization Road East, a mix of Ojibwe and English names were shortlisted, including Agaming, Nibi, Harmony, Shoreline, and Sunrise Drive. Councillor Wendy Brunetta suggested a compromise of having an Indigenous name with an English version for residents, but that idea was flatly rejected by Mayor June Call.
I wonder if there's somehow a compromise here where we could have both the sort of English version and the Ojibwe name included somehow on the street sign, but that, people could use the word that they're most comfortable with in terms of their address.
I think we want to make a point here and use just that Indigenous name, not put both. That's just my feeling. If we're going to make a case for reconciliation, and we want to prove that, I think we prove it by having a First Nation name. It's simple and it's easy for people to understand what it means.
The committee has recommended the selected names take effect January 1st, 2022. This all comes on the heels of the city of Dryden, which voted unanimously last month to change its Colonization Avenue to Memorial Avenue and Buzu Avenue. Martin Falls and Webequie First Nations have announced the proposed Northern Road Link is ready to begin the environmental assessment process. The project involves a 120-kilometer road in a remote part of the region. The road would connect two other proposed road development projects, providing the First Nations with access to the Ring of Fire mining area and the provincial highway system. It also has the potential to become a critical transportation linkage for remote communities and bring job and business prospects. Martin Falls Chief Bruce Ashley Penescom says the Northern Road Link will improve the living conditions in his community and says it has potential to bring economic reconciliation.
To build a road into the Ring of Fire means an opportunity for our First Nation to have a meaningful engagement with the governments, government of Ontario and Canada, and also engagement with the business sector, the mining sector.
The environmental assessment has to be done in a proper way, in a manner that's satisfactory to the First Nations, even the surrounding First Nations, and we have to work closely together. So it is a good opportunity.
Over the next few months, the two First Nations will consult with rights holders and stakeholders to prepare a draft for the EA. Once the provincial government approves the terms of reference, the assessment can move forward. When we come back, a plea to make safe drinking water a right in the province of Ontario. Kiiwetinoong MPP Saul Mamakwa continues to push ahead with his private members bill at Queen's Park, calling for all Ontarians to have access to safe drinking water. The NDP member says 25 First Nations are still under boil water advisories and says the lack of clean drinking water is a profound crisis. He believes there are two versions of Ontario, one where clean water is guaranteed and another where people are forced to live without it. Mamakwa says this is structural racism and is calling on the Ford government to support his bill so that all Ontarians can have reliable drinking water no matter where they live.
Can you imagine, Speaker, being a young person who has never, ever known what it's like to be able to drink water from the tap? For young people, this is their reality. Imagine living with bath water that you could make your little one sick, or tap water that isn't safe enough to use to make dinner for your family.
We continue to call on the federal Liberal government to end the rhetoric and the photo ops and do the right thing and start delivering real action for First Nations communities. This includes ending boiled water advisories for all First Nation reserves and making the necessary investments to resolve this issue now and for future generations.
Several MPPs voiced their support for the bill. However, the vote was not unanimous, so it will be deferred to a second reading on Monday after question period. Ontario's police watchdog is asking witnesses to alleged sexual assaults in Pikangikum First Nation to come forward. The Special Investigations Unit says it was notified by OPP on March 19th of 2 complaints that women were sexually assaulted by its officers. The allegations led Pikangikum to expel 10 OPP officers from its territory in March, although they've now returned to the community. Chief Dean Owen says police misconduct has occurred over many years and the community has lost trust in the service. The SIU is urging anyone who may have knowledge of the allegations to come forward. Following the sudden departure of its chief administrative officer earlier this year, the township of Red Rock has found a replacement, and it's a familiar face to many residents. Former Scriber Mayor Mark Figliomeni has been hired to fill the role, taking over from former CAO Albert Hedrick, who resigned in March. Figliomeni spent 4 years at the helm of Scriber, helping create policies that brought it back from the brink of bankruptcy. Red Rock Mayor Darkees Robinson says his experience makes him both a good fit for the role, and she's excited to work with him.
He's a small town guy, loves municipal policy. He is, just a great person in general, has lots of, network experience. He knows what small town politics is like. Red Rock and Scriber are, quite similar, with what's going on in the communities, projects that are coming up, taxes, MPAC, all of that. And he's well versed in that.
Figliomeni is expected to start on May 25th. Some public outcry has Red Rock reviewing its handling of nuisance animals. This after the use of lethal traps on a group of beavers who caused some significant damage in the town's marina. Adam Riley has that story.
We all know our own personal beliefs may vary from what our responsibility is for the town. So this is a hard decision. It's a hard topic, but it must be had.
The marina in the township of Red Rock is dealing with a rodent issue after a group of beavers made one of the fish beds their home and have begun doing what beavers do best, chewing down trees. Unfortunately, the beavers have targeted the trees that act as a windbreak on the marina's breakwall. So the town took action, but not the action resident Kathy Chappelle was expecting when she took her dogs out for a walk late last month.
I was shocked to see there was a barricade and a sign that said, "Beware, submerged beaver traps." So I was very upset by this. I mean, I specifically go down there to watch them and take pictures of them.
Out of the 6 animals, 2 were trapped and subsequently harvested. And while Chappelle understands and respects the significant cultural and historical role of trapping, she feels this was not the way to address the issue.
Northwestern Ontario is based on the, trapping, but this is a park. This is our town park, a municipal park where people walk and play and swim and fish and enjoy wildlife all around them. So I've been advocating very strongly to see if we can look at alternatives. And one of them is to look at putting wire fencing around the trees.
Mayor Darkees Robinson says trapping the animals is part of the town's prior practice for situations like this and was done to protect infrastructure. But after being contacted by Chappelle, the traps were removed on May 1st to allow council some time to discuss the issue and perhaps find a way to capture the animals alive and relocate them.
We are looking for alternatives as live traps. There are none in the area. We did contact the MNR, and there's none in Nipigon or Thunder Bay. So I have reached out to Red Rock Indian Band to see if there's a process maybe that they can assist us with. Again, we're trying to, appease both the public and the township.
Council has tasked its environmental committee to come up with a solution, which Chappelle says she has been invited to be a part of, and council is expected to receive a report from that committee at the first meeting in June. Adam Riley, TBT News.
Paramedics with Ontario's air ambulance service Orange have provided their union with a resounding strike mandate. 94% voted in favor, leading up to their collective bargaining with the province. The negotiations will include a face-off with the Ford government over its legislation to cap public sector wage increases at 1% per year. Unifor will seek an exemption to the cap, as well as greater mental health and PTSD coverage in the new contract. A Unifor bargaining rep from Thunder Bay says a strike won't impact the level of care offered to patients and says services will not be decreased. It will more likely impact operations behind the scenes, such as preparing vehicles, equipment, and supplies, and slowing down training programs. Unifor President Jerry Dias expects the bargaining process to be completed within a few weeks and says a strike will only come as a last resort. Coming up after the break, a proposed mine could be beneficial to the North Shore. Terrace Bay Council heard a presentation from Generation PGM this week. The company is looking to build an open-pit copper palladium mine just north of Marathon, and it could be economically beneficial for the area. This comes less than a year after Barrick Gold announced the extension of its Hemlo operation. Adam Riley has details.
In just 2 years, an influx of almost 1,000 jobs to the North Shore economy could happen if all of the approvals come into place for Generation PGM's proposed copper palladium mine near Marathon. In a presentation Monday to Terrace Bay Council, officials with the company laid out the plan, which would see a mine and processing center built in region. Company spokesperson Catherine Moffat says the company has completed its environmental impact study and is now moving on to the joint review panel.
So joint meaning between the provincial and federal government. They will be reviewing the environmental impact statement in a panel form and giving their recommendations to the government to see whether the project should go forward or not.
Marathon Mayor Rick Dumas says he is hopeful the project gets the go-ahead, as there will be many benefits for his community. He also notes the market is looking very favorably on palladium and copper at this time.
So everything's falling in place right now. The price of palladium is up around $3,000 an ounce. Copper's at over $4 a pound as we speak. So all the commodities that are in the ground outside of our community, as the crow flies, about 4.5 kilometers actually from the community, within the boundaries of the community as well, Adam. So great for Marathon, great for the region. We look at mining now as a regional player.
As a result of the mine, Dumas expects there will likely be an increased demand for housing in not just Marathon, but the entire region.
We have very little, if any, and most of our neighboring communities as well experience that, with very little house stock, no vacancies within the housing market. So we'll see some development within our community. We also have plans for another subdivision that was part of the original plan in the 1980s.
At this time, the lifespan of the mine is expected to be 13 years. Adam Riley, TBT News.
That's all for this edition of Northwest Newsweek. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.